Hi, I'm Thomas Dickerson. I'm a second-year PhD student working with Paul Valiant on algorithms in scientific computing. My question is for Professor Papadimitriou. You alluded to this a little bit in your talk. You had a recent paper on satisfiability in evolution, and the kind of takeaway was that we can expect within polynomial time these populations to evolve solutions to satisfiability problems. And in some sense, this seemed like a surprising result in that satisfiability questions are not necessarily things which you can evolve modularly or incrementally. On the other hand, the formulation of the polynomial time requirement also seemed to be in the the probability of being satisfied to begin with, which is significantly less satisfying. So these are surprising. So these two surprising and unsurprising things seem to be kind of in tension with each other. I was wondering what your comments were.
Right. So exactly. So why you are not and should be surprised about that result is, as a computer scientist, is that these are where we can only evolve easy satisfiability problems. On the other hand, the point that paper was making is that this second-grade task can be done by a blind process. I mean, it's and by a blind watchmaker. Yeah, so that's right. And of course, even it was not even that was not very easy to prove. That's why there are all these actually conditions and so on. So you really unfortunately the world's most interesting problems probably cannot be proved with 21st century mathematics. So.
Hi, my name is Shashwat. I'm a senior math concentrator at Brown. So I have a question for Professor Valiant. So I guess there are two ways in which a computational theory of evolution is very interesting. One is, I guess, you can understand all these questions about evolution, like how can it work so fast and how do we see such complex life forms. And the other is it helps you make cool algorithms that might do machine learning tasks better than things that already exist. So I guess my question is, how compatible would you say these two goals are? In a sense, how much should a computational theory of evolution look like actual evolution? Because it seems like you can do machine learning better in a Lamarckian setting, but it doesn't tell you anything about evolution.
Right. I mean, so okay. So my interest is mainly on the. I want to understand biological evolution, and I use computer science. But so certainly, I mean, with what I've described, evolution is a special case of machine learning. So it gives you zero hope that you can get any useful technology out of evolution which you couldn't from machine learning. And so in some sense, that's borne out by experiment that algorithms inspired by evolution have a place, but usually any task you can do with one of those, you can usually find some other method which does as well. Justifying work on evolution as having a technological aim, I find that very difficult. So I don't do it at all. So I think I study evolution just to understand biological evolution.
Cool. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Amy Becker with the CS department. I work with Philip Klein. I'm a first-year PhD student. My question is actually a pretty good follow-up to Shashwat's in terms of, and can be addressed to either of you or both of you. It seems like you're looking at learning more about things like evolution or the brain, things that we currently have models for that are most likely to be imprecise or inaccurate. Like would be naive to think that 100, 200 years from now we'd have the same understanding of these things. And I'm just wondering about kind of going into learning more about these things, building off of a model that we assume to be correct, but we also assume to be incorrect. And how do we make it robust against those inaccuracies?
So when evolution is a very mature field. Okay, has been considered a mature field. In other words, it has reached its apex of formalism 65 years ago in 1950. And so, if you take a fresh look from a different point of view at such a field, you can hope to expose something that is missing. So, a kind of a spirit of methodology that may be needed and missing. Okay, and this is the mode of criticism, sort of, work like Lesses and mine make at evolutionists. Okay, so and it's also the reason why they're not 100% welcome. Okay, so I don't know to what extent I answered your question. I mean, that there are. We both said that there are. I certainly started my talk with this, that there are sort of incredible gaps in our understanding of evolution. Okay, so basically, I mean, anybody who would think about evolution would ask 5 questions. Okay, none of them is answered. Okay, the most basic of all. I mean, is evolution too successful? Should we be surprised at how successful evolution is, or how unsuccessful? Is 3.5 billion years too much or too little? Okay, so no clue. Okay, so how do things like the eye evolve? Okay, why are we so different even though we are under constant selection? Okay, and then the theoretical one. I mean, why there is sex? Okay, so why these are all huge gaps. I mean, sex is ubiquitous, right? I mean, if imagine that we didn't know what photosynthesis was, right? And yet the planet is green. That would be a pretty huge gap in our knowledge, right? I mean, but now we know why leaves exist, okay? And yet more species procreate by sex than have leaves, okay? So and still we don't know something so basic.
If I can, I'm not quite sure. So sometimes your question was also about how we can insulate ourselves against future new knowledge in these fields, about the choice of models, that kind of thing. But I emphasize similar things, that in some sense, computation gives you a new perspective on problems for which there weren't any similar models. And so, for example, in looking at the brain, we can bring knowledge which is obvious to every computer scientist, but isn't there at all, isn't obvious to the other people who study the brain. So, for example, we know that complicated computational devices have many levels of description, so you shouldn't expect to describe it all just at one level. So hence, I mean, these things Christos talked about is having some level of description of the tasks of this link join, which is intermediate between high level and single neurons. So what we're still at this very early stage of putting into models things which are blatantly obvious, that you just have to have them. Okay, so I think that's one answer, that we're at such an early stage that we're doing the obvious things.
I'm David Meyer-Frankenfeld. I also work with Phil Klein. I wanted to start with a more technical question for Professor Papadimitriou. in the game theoretic interpretation, you said that the genes are effectively trying to optimize this sum of an entropy and a cumulative fitness function. What does it mean to optimize such a sum when the entropy is a function only of the current allele distribution, whereas the cumulative fitness?
Sorry. Is this working? Okay. I can talk loud. So both terms are functions of x, of the allele distribution. Okay, because the fitness of the overall fitness of the cumulative fitness of this gene is a linear sum of the probabilities. Okay, basically it's the expectation of the fitness of over the distribution. So
just there's a question about what that notation was. You had fx.
it's based so.
F of x, or was it an operator, right?
F, sorry, it was inner product. It was inner product. Sorry, yeah. So x is a distribution, okay? Like it's like 10%, 40%, 40%, 10%. Okay, you know.
X is a probability.
It's a distribution, yes. And F again is the relative fitness, the cumulative fitness of each allele, okay, in the current environment. All right. I mean, actually in the.
So it's a vector for all the.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So basically, what I'm saying is that it is a nonlinear function, but concave, plus a linear function. So it's strictly concave. It has a maximum, and lo and behold, I mean, what the genes do is they choose this maximum, okay, for the next to play next.
Thank you. And somewhat relatedly, this clearly only works for a single population. I was wondering if you think there's hope that a similar approach is going to get game theoretically interesting results for the interaction between multiple populations.
That's where game theory has been used extensively in games between organisms of the same species or games between species. Yes, of course. Yes, that's very important. So I should say on the outset that this game theoretic formulation, I'm very fond of it. It's one small piece of the puzzle. Okay, maybe it's a moderately large piece of the puzzle, but it leaves out many things. Okay, it doesn't talk about mutations. It doesn't talk about speciation events. It doesn't talk about the environment. Okay, I do think that there is a lot more to do there. Okay, that there is a lot more to do there, and of course we have already been thinking about generalizing this to an ecosystem. Okay, so what happens when you have an overall ecosystem. I mean, our concept which underlies this and defined called mixability. It turns out that it also generalizes to ecosystems. Okay, so this is an obvious next step to take. Okay, thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you.
My name is John Oberlin. I'm a PhD student studying robotic hand-eye coordination. My question is for whomever will answer. Cybernetics is a study of systems and their control through feedback. John von Neumann could be considered the premier cyberneticist, being a master of diverse but related fields. Indeed, one of his legacies of von Neumann computer architecture is the ideal cybernetic apparatus, being our ultimate field programmable feedback network and the basis of nearly all cybernetic organisms. But as I look back over the last 60 years, it appears to me, but forgive me if I'm wrong because I wasn't there for a lot of it, that fields of study have become progressively more specialized. So to summarize, in the last 3 generations, we've gone from cybernetics in the first to AI and control theory in the second. And now in the third and current generation, we can receive degrees in such fields as AI, machine learning, algorithms, pattern recognition, optimal control, and topics such as computer vision and NLP. So if we're ever going to construct large systems from the pieces that we have forged, it seems to me that we must do one of either two things. individuals must broaden their education in order to be able to work with these diverse fields, or people must learn to work more efficiently as teams. So suppose that you had to champion just one of these approaches. Which would it be, and how should we proceed?
Well, I think my quick instinct on your general point, obviously things have gotten more complicated because we understand better how complicated the real problems are. They were just underestimated 60, 70 years ago. But as a quick answer to your last point, I just think, I don't know much about big teams doing things. I don't have experience of that. So I think the answer is that each of us internally have to be well educated. That in our brains, within each of our brains, we have to understand several things. I think I vote for that.
Okay.
Totally agree totally agree. That's also my instinct. You happen to be speaking of two of the people who were the last people who knew all of computer science.
Yes.
When I was, the morning before my qualifying exams at Princeton, okay, that was 1975. I knew all of computer science. Okay, right now there is absolutely no way for somebody to know all of approximation of NP complete, approximate complexity of approximation. Okay, so it's impossible. So which is probably 1% of theory. Okay, so it has what you are saying is both. Makes us very nostalgic of the von Neumann days, which was even more inspiring than the days I lived. But also it's inevitable, and it has to do both with what Les said, but also with the workings of the social dynamics of the academic profession. Okay, so we all have to become famous, and the only way to do that, is to split the pie in the smallest. Right. So that's.
Cool. Thank you.
So maybe another sociological question to follow up from that. As people who both have worked in some sense interdisciplinarily in bringing the algorithmic or computational lens to bear on other sciences, what have been your experiences of the reactions of those other disciplines in absorbing these computational ideas? As someone who's also worked in scientific computing, across chemistry and ecology and physics, I found that frequently these are ideas that are not easily digested to people who haven't grown up in the computer science academic culture. And so I'm curious, do you have suggestions for best practices or other thoughts on that?
Well, the first thought is that you first thing that you have to do, as you've probably already found out, is that you have to learn not to care too much, what other people think. That that if you think something is important to investigate, you do it, and if you can't persuade anyone that it's important, maybe that should give you food for thought. But you should still carry on if you think it's important. I mean, it's extremely difficult to persuade anyone of a different kind of thinking. And obviously, historians of science have written about this, saying that you can never persuade anyone of anything new. You can only persuade the next generation. It's you're asking a very complicated question. It's extremely difficult, and you should have very, very low expectations.
So it's I totally agree. It's the most difficult thing I've done. But a few things. Like both of us have done. Okay, you have to bring it to their own turf. In other words, you have to subject it to their unfair criticism. Okay, that's one thing. Okay, because otherwise, frankly, you are not kidding anybody who you should care about. Okay, so number one. Also, it is paradigms by definition are something that are to be defended at all costs. Okay, so that's. On the other hand, I have to say that I had so far I had experience, I guess, with I think more and more. I mean, I started with databases, control theory, so they were very welcoming. Okay, so then came economics. Okay, then came networking. Okay, so they were elated to have theoreticians talk to them. Okay, economists from the other sciences, the economists were in some sense the best case. Okay, and you can understand why. So their profession, their science, like ours, has been sort of invaded by the realities of the internet. So so a lot of economics has changed. I mean, and it's clear that there is a newfound affinity between computation and economics. Okay. Now, if you now go to evolution, it has not been as welcoming. Okay, so just because because paradigms are worth defending. So
on a similar note, you mentioned how like the title of your talk was like computation as a lens as a lens, and then you talked about other sciences and things like that. It seems to me that somehow mathematical reasoning has been very pervasive in other sciences. Like everybody wants to come up with equations for things like evolution and things like that. So in that sense, so the mathematical equations are like descriptions, and computational understanding is more like an efficient simulation. So how come? Why do you think people are so easily accepting of the philosophical implications of not being able to come up with a mathematical description, but are more resistant to, the computational reasoning? Like if you told someone, I can't efficiently simulate something like evolution, maybe they'd be less worried than if you said, I can't come up with an equation.
Okay, I can try and answer. Okay, so in some sense with mathematics, somebody else has done the hard work, all right? I mean, so for the past 300 years, okay, ever since Newton, mathematicians, right, have been walking around and telling natural scientists that, hey, I can solve your problem, right? I mean, and of course they were rebuffed and sort of, get out of my hair kind of thing, sort of, many times. But sort of, they persisted, and they did solve the world's most amazing problems, right? I mean, so this has been done, right? I mean, and what we are doing is a little, we are walking around, sort of, just newbies, sort of, and saying, hey, I think I understand why I understand the basic problem of your field, sort of, and they are not used to that, okay? So, mathematics, of course, so, so they welcomed the invasion of mathematics, so, but not ours, okay? Because who are we? Yeah.
But I think also I think the main reason people would be hostile usually when they don't understand what you're saying, and the big difference I think is that most people have learned mathematics in high school, and no one, and I think and people don't learn, say, algorithms in high school. So people kind of know roughly what mathematics is about, but they've got no idea, say, what algorithms has to offer. And also, I think on the mathematical side, I don't think it's that easy on that side either. I think the kind of mathematics is a big divider of humanity as well. So if you tell people about some kind of mathematics they don't understand, they're hostile again.
Thanks.
Right, so we're opening the mic to the entire audience.
Hi, my name is Matteo. I'm a postdoc here with Ellie. So Alan Turing gave us a theory of what is computable. To quote the title of one of your works, you gave us a theory of what is learnable. But now you're studying the brain. At the same time, the brain is a machine that can learn, but at the same time can also create new concepts. Do you think we can envision a theory of the thinkable? Are there functions or concepts that we cannot think?
Okay, well, no, I think you're asking exactly the right kind of question. I think, going through a dictionary and saying which words have kind of effective definitions is just the right thing to do. But then I'll challenge you a bit into exactly what you mean by this. I mean, whether you mean that it's kind of not constructible in your brain like other concepts.
So my question, I guess, is whether the brain is a Turing machine that we can, compute everything that is computable, but maybe the definition is a loop, some sense, or there are concepts that we cannot think in polynomial time.
Yeah, I think the brain is a very resource limited thing. So Turing computability is far off. So I think everything is in terms of the quantitative resources of your brain, which eventually will even fill up. If you
Which is happening to me right now.
So I'm sure a lot can be said about that. Probably no beautiful, elegant theory, but I think a lot can be said about that. Yes.
All right, thank you. I have another question, which actually follows up from what Sasha asked, and I would like to start with a quote from Vladimir Vapnik's book, The Nature of Statistical Learning Theory, and the quote is the following. Of course, it is very interesting to know how humans can learn. However, this is not necessarily the best way for creating an artificial learning machine. It has been noted that the study of birds flying was not very useful for constructing the airplane. And you seem to agree with that. At the same time, I think that perhaps the brain is the brain and society is the most complex machines and systems that we know of. So is it really envisionable that we can learn how to build better algorithms from something else that is not the study of these most complex systems that we know? And this is, whoever wants to reply.
Well, I think the brain is made of components which are very specialized and limited. That is, neurons evolved for whatever reason, and we just have a big jumble of them. So they're very slow. We don't have that many of them. So it is a very quantitatively challenged machine. So yes, there's no reason to believe that what the brain does is the solution to everything. So and also, I mean, from related to what I was saying. So someone who designs a machine to do something like vision. Even if they're imitating humans, they're probably imitating both what people learn during life and also what evolution does. So it's not a direct imitation of what the brain is doing. Okay, so I agree with Vapnik on this.
Christos, different from the one I asked in your talk, but we can do that anytime. In the talk, you argued that Nash equilibria were inaccessible, and I assume you're referring to your result that computing them in matrix games is NP hard. So as you know, I like the punchline, but I want to understand the joke better. For one thing, I mean, we often don't have to solve games that are indefinitely large, and they often have special structure beyond randomly assigned payoffs in a matrix game. And we often have access to heuristic rules that don't duplicate the effects of equilibrium but may come close. What do you think, what kind of generalizations or extensions or alternative formulations of the idea that it's hard to play Nash equilibria, and is it a fact about fixed points of all kinds, whether they're Nash equilibria or not, or is it a fact about rules of all kinds that operate on the data in a matrix game?
Vince, I don't know if you realize it. I probably don't realize, but it's like five wonderful questions you asked. Okay,
I'll settle for the answers
so right.
to two.
So I'll try to answer a few of them. So by inaccessible, I mean the following. Okay, that hardness, which actually technically is not epicompleteness, it's something different. Okay, which means the following: that if the world of complexity is the way we understand it, and that's a big if. But if the world of the complexity is the way the large consensus of computer scientists believes it is, then there are families of games which, no matter how hard we try, we will not be able to find their equilibria within the lifetime of the universe. Okay, so these may mean absolutely nothing about anything that happens in the real world. Okay, but it has the following effect. Basically, it revises Nash's theorem. Okay, it says that all games have Nash equilibria, but there are some games such that these Nash equilibria you will never find. Okay, in other words, they exist, but that's fiction. Okay, they really don't exist. Okay, so basically it says that this universality is suspect. Okay, it's not total. So, I also said the following. That computer scientists are cynical about interactability. Okay, because we respect the concept. Okay, but we have lived with it for 40 years now. We have known how to go around it. Okay, and we solve intractable problems all the time. Okay, but imagine, however, that Nash's theorem stated that for all practical purposes, all games have a Nash equilibrium. Okay, it would not be as impressive and right. Okay. So right.
That's
so
in fact the case. You stated the theorem only for finite matrix games.
Yeah. And right. Yes. Of course. Yeah. So to address at least one of your other questions, yes. It's this result has created a little subfield in the interface between computer science and game theory, and the prevalent open question, which is still puzzling us 10 years later, okay, is whether you can approximate Nash equilibrium effectively. Okay, in computer science, approximation is one of the strategies we use to deal with NP completeness. Okay, but games are different. Okay, because in computer science, if somebody wants to solve the traveling salesman problem, okay, comes to me, I'm an algorithms consultant, and I tell him, listen, okay, I'll solve it for you, and my guarantee will be that it's within, it's 20% of the optimum, but that's all that science can do for you right now, okay? But games are different, okay? This will not work, because I go to you and say, you are playing this game, I'm telling you to play this, and don't worry, it's about 20% worse than what you could do, but that's all, okay? And you say, you are full of it. I'm not going to do what you are telling me, because I know what my best response is. And first of all, why should I believe that the other guy would follow your recommendation either? Okay, so in other words, it does work. Okay, the approximation does not work in this. Okay, so in order to have
because it depends on common knowledge.
Exactly. Also, yeah, precisely. And also there is the unforgiving fact that best responses are always easy. Yeah. So that's so the only concept of approximation that would work is if you can push approximation to such tiny amounts that credibly you would not literally not lift a finger to improve your situation.
Thank you.
So my question has to do with the simulations of evolution you were doing, and it's sort of you said you spoke about how complex the human genome is, and we're often trying to explore this question of how does such incredible complexity arise from evolutionary processes and things like that. But obviously, evolution probably wasn't gunning just for human beings. And so I guess my question is, how do you measure what is complex? Or how do you, when you see something, how can you say that, oh, this is how complex this is, or this is like the kind of big achievement we were looking for, that sort of thing?
Well, I think one way is just seeing, how complex living things are. So if you've got, say, 20,000 genes, each with expression functions which are quite complex, we don't exactly know what. I mean, the big scientific question is what function class are they being picked from? Does biology pick them from? So so this is what goes on. They pick from some class. It could be linear functions, quadratic functions, Boolean functions. Who knows what they are? But it's one of those. So that's what's going on, and we have to have a story of what's going on. All I want is a plausible story of what biology is really doing. I think we'll probably get this plausible story in the next 10, 20 years. And clearly one big part is that the story has to satisfy some algorithmic requirements, like what I described, and I think it's very finely balanced that if the functions are too simple, biology doesn't work. If they're too complex, then there's no evolution algorithm. So I think my answer to your question is that estimating the complexity, all you have to do is just look at present life forms and what they're doing, and kind of we know what they are. There's so many proteins, so many genes. And in biology journals, we can see these graphs of expression levels, and we just have to have a story on how plausibly they can maintain themselves in evolution as the environment changes. They can mutate, and so one can make it very concrete like that.
If I can add something. I'm even more pessimistic than this, because. I think that the complexity is going to keep manifesting itself for longer than 20 years. Okay, that every time we learn something, every time every time sort of you read science. Okay, you realize that the picture was incredibly more complicated than you thought. Okay, sort of in the last year of biology research, okay, we discovered that there is a second code of life. Okay, there is a second sort of way to map triples of nucleotides to proteins, and this has to do with which proteins they attract. So biologists all over the world said, "Oh, I see. So all you knew, so this thing you knew was only half of the truth." Okay, right? So we have been trying to do protein folding. Okay, so we just in the last year we found out that there are proteins which basically as soon as the first amino acids come out, messengers go to the cell and say, you know what, an amino acid that starts like a protein that starts like that is being produced, and a faculty of trainers of teachers is assembled, and they go, and as the protein comes out, they train it to do the right thing. Okay, so there are membrane simulators that basically tell the protein, young man, when you grow up, you are going to go through these things. Let's see how you are doing. Okay, so they train it to be the right. So basically, what we knew about chaperones is probably sort of just one dimension of the 20 that exist. Okay, sort of and who knows? Sometimes I have this feeling that there is an old man with a long beard somewhere upstairs, or I'm sitting next to a podium that has God in it, right? And every time, sort of, you say, "Oh, you found out the genome. Oh, you're doing great." Okay, and so he's smiling all the way. Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. So my question has to do with talking about the convergence times of evolution. How can evolution work quickly enough given the history of the world? And at the very end, you mentioned epigenetics and its relation to Lamarckian evolution. And although that is a different question, could we say that is an easier question? Could evolution with Lamarckian properties, can we strictly say that would converge faster than a non-Lamarckian evolution?
Well, if it's strongly, if it's really non-Lamarckian, if it's really Lamarckian, then you have general machine learning. So I mean, so of course, one point is that it's so implausible that no one.
It's not.
That's going on. So usually, yeah. So certainly you can prove mathematical results that's much better than Darwinian evolution.
But it's not biologically plausible. That's not.
Well, it's not biologically plausible, and so the other aspect of this whole thing is that this theory of evolution I was talking about is in some sense a kind of a microscopic theory of one step of evolution. And clearly, if you want to understand the whole global sweep of evolution, then there are lots of other factors which have happened which are outside the theory. Asteroids striking, climate change, or whatever else. So to really understand what evolution had happened, it's probably impossible unless you understand all these extraneous happenings. But certainly, if you could have full Lamarckian evolution, that would change everything. Yeah,
there is, the reason Lamarck is implausible is very computer sciencey, okay? And it was pointed out 135 years ago by Augustus Weismann. It's basically because Lamarckianism presupposes the inversion of a one-way function. The mapping from genotype to phenotype is one way. Is a hashing function. Okay, so how do you invert this? Okay, so that's very implausible. What is a little more plausible is that there is some intelligence in the way mutations happen. Okay, not that there is somebody that senses and then engineers mutations. Okay, but very much, it could be that there is evidence that something that I first saw in Lesser's model may be the biological truth, that the genotype creates its own mutations by some biological means, okay, which means many things. Okay, if this happens, and in fact. There is a very interesting paper by Dilivnat in biology. In a recent paper that actually argues for that evidence overwhelmingly points in this direction. So it has many effects. One is that it makes the DNA much more like a Turing machine tape than it was before. Okay, Number two, it also creates very interesting. One of the reasons why sex is we don't understand why sex is because of course you create combinations, but then you throw them away. Okay, because they're not because their children would not look anything like them. Okay, but now a lucky combination by doing the right mutations. Is going to leave its imprint on the whole population forever. Okay, so it makes sex a little more plausible. Okay.
So maybe a quick related question is bootstrapping. So humans clearly appear to be learning agents and have also been produced by evolutionary process, but it also seems that we're not that far off from engineering our own genome. And so in some sense, evolution has produced a entity that that is in fact a full learning agent that's now guiding evolution rather than simply doing statistical query. Do you have thoughts on how that fits into your computational model, or?
Yeah, well, certainly I think my model of evolution captures the past, and certainly the rules totally change. If you can change your own genome, then the rules totally change, and then you're into an era where the Darwinian evolution is irrelevant.
And it's no longer fiction. I mean, people are doing experiments with changing genes in fertilized eggs. Actually, a huge paper in Cell, and so this is evolution. So you have to define what evolution is. And Darwinian evolution means that the only force is natural selection. Okay, and so anything else is not what we call evolution. Okay, so maybe you want to give it a different name or a modified name.
Yeah, so we're in the Lamarckian era now.
Right. Yeah.
So I want to make a comment and also ask a question myself in this, which I think is interesting for the discussion so far. So what can we do in such difficult topics? We cite von Neumann, right? So here is a quotation from him. The sciences do not try to explain, they hardly even try to interpret. They mainly make models. By a model is meant a mathematical construct which, with the addition of certain verbal interpretation, describes observed phenomena. The justification of such a mathematical construct is solely and precisely that it is expected to work. So, you see the computer scientist colleagues getting into this field of modeling evolution with the methods of computer science and with goals of understanding from the computational point various aspects that are germane to computer science, speed, mechanism, and so on. And you are going to see our colleagues, the mathematicians, having their own models of evolution, and I am sure that there are different levels in which they are quite different in what they model, and there is reconciliation. And I worked with biologists, especially the most, the leading experimentalist of the area, and, he is not even considering a discussion with somebody who doesn't study transcription factors and gene and all this regulatory system, which gene regulatory, the cis regulatory system, which is the, of comparable complexity to the central nervous system, and without doing causality experiments, systematic perturbation, and see cause and effect, there is no way to understand from their point of view. So there are so many levels at which we talk about models, and this should be something that shouldn't puzzle the students in the sense that you see so many different. To give you an example, I teach advanced algorithm computational biology, and I teach evolutionary model in a serious way, typically the coalescent model, and it's very different than what my colleagues are building from the computer science theory, but all of them are contributions to understanding deep questions, and they coexist. So in this context of many models and many levels of abstraction in which we think about the brain, the most sophisticated object on Earth, here is a quote from von Neumann, and I would like to see how you feel about this. So in the incredibly beautiful book, The Computer and the Brain, which is so actual even today, he says that, and makes an argument that the brain works but not with large numbers. There is no mechanism for working with large numbers because there is no rounding way of doing operations and taking care of the rounding errors and so on. So to me, it's a shocking thing that we do computation without large numbers. And how are your thinking models trying to deal with this issue? Do you believe this?
We do computation with just 0 and 1, don't we? I thought. Actually, I learned to compute. I learned to program on IBM 1640, and this was decimal. Can you believe this? So I never got this bit thing. Okay, but that I believe that we do bits. So these are not large numbers. Do we do large numbers? Do we do? I thought.
Can we think about the theory of computation without large numbers? Your sequences are numbers in some way, and if you start doing operations, you have to deal with this. So von Neumann argued that there is no mechanism because of the arity of the interaction take care of rounding errors. And therefore, he proposes that it's extremely parallel with extremely redundant, very short computations and overwhelmingly parallel with no large numbers, and a different way. And with the analog thing of missing bits and means nothing because it's.
So I guess you are saying, so to correct myself, you are saying that there are no numbers at any level of abstraction. Yes, right, yeah.
But I think everyone accepts that now, that the information really comes in these spikes. The only question is when the spikes travel, and the spike, even the accuracy of the timing may not be that important. So I think what you quoted for Neumann, everyone agrees that's true now, I think. No, that's no.
Yet another mother.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I think maybe we'll continue over dinner.
Over dinner, yes.
It's going to be a long discussion.
Any other questions? We started late, so maybe Professor Weiss? All right.
So I'm an ignorant physicist, but I talk a bit to biologists, and I talked with Ursula Goodenough, who is a biologist who studied all kinds of creatures all the way back to algae and up to chimps and humans. And she finds that there's two kinds of genes that mutate much faster than the average, one being the immune system for obvious reasons, but the other being genes concerned with mating. And that this quite universal tendency for mating genes to mutate fast is in fact nature's way of driving speciation, that rapid speciation is in fact the driving force for evolution in the large. So what do you say about that when you're calculating rates of evolution?
Well, that's exactly what this model I described tries to capture, that that uniform mutation across the genome is just one theory, and it's very unlikely to be true. So these theories that so some parts of the genome are so-called highly conserved, that they're the same, they haven't changed much, and the same in us and in vegetables. And other parts have changed, but even there's some dispute whether the parts which don't change, are they maintained by selection, or are they maintained by the genome knowing where not to change? So these so I permit exactly this kind of mechanisms you mentioned, but it's very hard to get from biologists many more details. Like even in your case, it's not clear whether is it somehow maintained. Are the other genes made more stable, are they enforced by selection, or is it that this gene just knows to have a higher mutation rate? But this is exactly what I want to resolve, and this theory, which I think is determinable in the next few decades, is are these kind of questions, I think.
Good.
So another piece of the puzzle is that not only genes that are related to sex mutate at a much higher rate, and that obviously has to do with the creation of sexual incompatibility and therefore speciation events, but also in gonads, in sexual cells, especially the sperm. There is a lot of superfluous transcriptional activity, something that is called, I believe it's called, for some, interestingly, promiscuous subscription. Okay, in other words, that transcription, that there is a lot of RNAs produced for no apparent reason, and except for sticking on the DNA and presumably often creating large transposition mutations. Okay, so so there is a lot. Sex has these emergent new mechanisms. So has given us new kinds of mechanisms for accelerating evolution.
All right.